It was a normal summer day. Now, I didn't have a terrible childhood, but I didn't have a great one either. My mother was struggling to make ends meet. We lived in a really crappy 2-bedroom house. It was my mother, her boyfriend, my 2 younger brothers, and myself. My mother worked nights and so did her boyfriend, so it was up to me to watch my 2 brothers in the evenings. It was just like any normal summer day at first. My friends and I hung out during the day, walk around our small town, enjoying the warm weather. Now, for it being a small town, there was still plenty to do. Walk through the woods, go down to the park, all the typical kid things. We decided to waste time at the park until I had to go home and watch my brothers. It was normal, boring stuff. We walked around, played with the basketball someone left behind, sat on the swings, and talked about our lives and what we were going to do when we got older. It was nearing 3 p.m. when we noticed a guy sitting on the bench over by the basketball court. Now, it was nearing time for me to get home anyways, and as the man was giving me and both my friends an odd vibe, we decided to leave. As we neared the main street, which my house also happened to be on, we parted ways. I get home, my mother lets me know there are leftovers for the boys and myself, then is on her way to work. We spend most of the day indoors watching TV or playing video games. Around 7:30 p.m., my brothers want to go outside and ride their bikes. It's just now getting dark, so I agree. They ride their bikes for about half an hour. I'm sitting on the curb, looking at my phone, texting my friends about how bored I am, when my youngest brother, who must have been 7 at the time, comes up to me and points over towards our house. I look just in time to see what looked like a man walk inside. I immediately tell my brothers not to worry and continue riding their bikes. I call my mother and let her know what just happened. She calls the police and they show up within 5 minutes. Seeing as the police station is just a few blocks away, small town. They do a full search of our home but find nothing. They speak to my mother on the phone and tell her nothing is there and it must have just been our imagination. Tentatively, my brothers and I go back into the house, so I sit them down and turn on the TV. Time flies and I look up and it's already 9:30 p.m. I really have to get them to bed soon. I head upstairs and go into our closet. All 3 of us share one bedroom, so all of our clothes are stuck in one closet. I turn on the light and start digging through a pile of clothes on the floor that we never got around to putting away. I hear a noise that sounds like a deep breath. Thinking it must be my imagination, I continue to pull out pajamas for my brothers. I go to grab their PJs and go to pull the string that turns off the light, when, out of the corner of my eye, I see movement. I look over and see a face peering out of the large pile of clothes. The man was hiding under our clothes in my closet. He made a sudden movement, and I book it. I just take off running. I can hear him struggling to get out of the clothes. I don't stop running, down the hallway, down the stairs, knocking anything over in the process in hopes it will slow him down. I burst into the living room and grab my brother's arm, practically pulling them out of the sockets in an attempt to drag them from the house. We're outside and 3 blocks away before I quit dragging them behind me. I reach for my phone and call the police, but it's not in my pocket. I left it on the couch. So, we hoof it. I drag my brothers behind me in the middle of the night. They're tired and they don't know what happened, and I won't tell them. They don't need to know. They would never want to go in their closet again. I get to the police station and they call our mother. They drive us home and she leaves work early. They do another full search, but once more, find nothing but the mess I made in my attempt to leave. No evidence, nothing. They basically told me to stop wasting their time, and they left. My mother said she believed me, but of course I knew it was just something she would say to console me. She says I can stay the night at a friend's if I can get a hold of someone, just to make me feel better. We all go inside, and my mom sends my brothers to go get cleaned up before bed. I walk over to the couch where I left my phone. Wasn't there, though. It's on the floor, smashed to pieces. Very obviously smashed by a hammer. Seeing as the hammer is sitting right next to it. I call my mother over and show her the mess of my phone on the ground. She walks over to our storage cabinet and pulls down the only toolbox we have. She opens it and our hammer is still inside. I didn't realize what that meant at the time, but now that I think about it, that man was in my home, in my closet, in my room, with a hammer, just waiting and hoping for me and my younger brothers to fall asleep. So, a little background here. My father was in the army for 21 years, retired, and moved to a very small town in Central Florida. He got bored after a couple of years, and even though we didn't need the money between his retirement and what my mom was making as a bookkeeper/tax prep, he wanted to go back to work. He started working at various gas stations, and it being a small town, the owners wouldn't care if I came there and helped him out with stocking and coolers, or even running the register, as long as I didn't sell any beer or smokes. This all took place in the late 80s and early 90s. The actual story I'm going to tell took place in 1990, and I remember the date well because it was shortly after my birthday, and being 15 in Florida, I had just gotten my learner's permit, and my dad would let me drive him to and from work, just to get some experience on the road, both at day and night. I was sitting in my usual spot at a table that was set up along the windows, book in hand, feet propped up, and a Mountain Dew on the table, along with some snacks. I would generally spend most of the evening that way, reading books, getting up to run the register/stock the cooler at different times. I remember glancing up because something caught my attention that was unusual, and I realized that a lady was walking up our parking lot from the direction of the interstate. The gas station was right on I-75. This in itself was really strange because where we're located, you don't get many people walking, and definitely not walking in the direction of the interstate. I figured she had broken down somewhere and was coming to use the phone or call for a tow truck or something. I was completely wrong. She came into the store, looked around for a few minutes, and I remember getting a strange, creepy feeling about her. She walked up to the counter and started telling my dad a story about how she had gotten stranded and needed a ride up to the next big town up north from us. Ocala was the town. This is important. My dad lets her know that he's working and there's no way he can take her. She turns and looks at me, and while she's looking away from him, my dad catches my eye and subtly shakes his head no. I was confused for a second, but then she turns back to my dad and points at me, asking if I can take her. My dad responded back that I only had a learner's permit and wouldn't be able to drive her anywhere and then drive back. Normally, I would have done it, even though it was illegal, because I'd done it a few times already. I didn't argue with my dad, since this was completely out of character for him. He was normally chatty with the customers, but for whatever reason, he was almost curt and dismissive of her. Turns out, he had a bad vibe about her from the minute he had seen her walking up the drive. Well, she cusses him for a minute, and he basically tells her to get out of the store. She slammed the door open. I thought the glass was going to break from how hard she slammed it, and then stalks out of the store and down the driveway. I keep an eye on her and continue to watch as she makes her way back up to the interstate and then starts up the northbound ramp. Almost a year passes and I'm in my bedroom. Less than a week before my 16th birthday, I hear my dad yelling from the living room, "Son, get your butt in here and look at this." I quickly run to the living room and see my dad pointing at the TV and look at the mugshot of the lady on the screen, and immediately remember the lady who had been in the store. Turns out, I almost gave a car ride to Eileen Warnos, who was later convicted of being a serial murderer and then later put to death. Still have nightmares about what could have happened. I am a nanny and have been with my current family for about 2 years when the oldest started preschool a couple of days a week. I'd drop him off around 9 and pick him up at 12:30, bringing his baby brother along. Now, this school was very hoity-toity, and most of the families who sent their children were very wealthy. Everyone entering the building had to wear badges with our names printed out. Every entrance had a security guard and a metal detector. They employed about 10 security guards around the building that patrolled the place open till close. I became very familiar with several of them because I'd passed them at their posts on the way in and out. Most were cops making a few extra $100 on their days off. Well, during the fall of 2017, the older boy moved to a new class on the other side of the school. This entrance was never as populated, so it was just a couple of people going in and out of the store during the day. The security guard was from a private company. He was always extremely polite and friendly. One of the nicer security guards without a doubt. He was probably in his late 20s. I thought he looked like a young Santa Claus. Round, jolly face with a permanently red nose and cheeks framed by a thick brown beard. Thin framed glasses and curly brown hair that went to about his shoulders. I eventually learned that his name was Nick, which only solidified my comparison. Months passed and we'd seen each other 2 or 3 days a week. The boys loved to wave at him and he'd always ask how their day was and we'd respond. In January of 2018, I came down with the flu and missed about 2 weeks of work. When I returned, I continued a regular schedule of school drop-offs and pickups. I was walking past Nick, waved, and he stopped me and said he noticed I was gone for 2 weeks and hoped I was feeling better. I smiled, thanked him, and said it was the sickest I had been, but I was glad to be back. I found it a bit odd that he had noticed and that he knew I was sick. I assumed my employers had told him when they did drop off and pick up while I was gone. I didn't think much of it and continued on, but when I went to leave, he stopped me again and told me he didn't know I wasn't the boy's mother. I laughed and basically said people confuse me for their mom because I'm with them all the time and we kind of look similar. He laughed too and then said, I was wondering, I never saw you with a husband and you don't have a ring on your finger, so I thought you were just a single mom. I laughed nervously to this and didn't know what to say, so I said, nope, just the nanny. I wanted to kick myself once I got back in the car. I was caught off guard and I'm generally a bit awkward, so tend not to respond the best when put on the spot. I guess I didn't realize he paid that much attention to me. I was a bit uneasy, but found it harmless. The next drop-off day, I said hello, and he responded by calling my name, which he had never done before, and telling me I looked nice, which he had definitely never done before, and I was very surprised. I started to think he may be interested in me since learning that I'm not actually a single mom. This was weird for me. I'm gay, and I also look very gay, so men very seldom take interest in me, and when they do, I'm weirded out. When I left, we exchanged a simple goodbye, and the rest of the week was pretty non-eventful. In early February, I was doing a drop-off yet again when on my way out with the baby strapped to my chest, Nick stopped me. He was very courteous, but he asked me if I'd be interested in going to dinner with him some weekend. Again, I am incredibly awkward, so my response was to laugh, and I could see he was immediately offended. I apologized and tried to explain that I was actually engaged and had been in a long-term relationship. This was true. His face changed and he said, well, where's your ring? The way he said this made me uncomfortable. I felt accused and defensive. I told him I don't really like wearing jewelry to work, so I only wear it on the weekends. I had accidentally scratched the baby with the ring when he was just a newborn and basically decided it wasn't something I'd wear when caring for them. He didn't seem satisfied with my answer, but let me go and told me to have a good evening. When I came to pick up the older boy that afternoon, Nick seemed agitated. I said hello and no answer. Okay. I was upset, but I let it go. I didn't want to hurt this guy's feelings, but geez, could he not tell I was gay? The constant button-ups didn't clue him in? Did I need to get an undercut? It wasn't personal. Why was he so angry? When I left, he again ignored me. I just kind of swallowed and thought, oh well, he'll get over it. I had put the baby in his seat in the back of my car and was buckling up the 3-year-old when a voice behind me boomed. You don't have to lie to me. I whipped around and Nick was about a foot away from me. I was trapped between the car, the open door, and his body. He no longer looked like this jolly, polite young man. He was big, probably about 6'2" and easily 400 pounds. I was scared and I was angry. How dare he come up and scare me? How dare he corner me and intimidate me when he knows I'm doing my job? I hurried out of the doorway and shut the door and locked it with the keys in my hand. I stood inches away and tried to back up. You didn't need to lie to me. If you aren't interested, just tell me. I don't like liars. I didn't owe this guy anything, but explained that I wasn't lying. I said I'm engaged and it's nothing personal. He was a nice, friendly guy, and I didn't mean to hurt his feelings. He was angry. He huffed and said, oh, you didn't hurt my feelings. I just don't appreciate dishonesty. You lied about being their mother, so I figured you were lying about this too. Oh, I was mad. I never once lied about being their mother. He assumed because I was the one doing the drop-offs and the pickups. Our conversations never got beyond hello, good day, and goodbye until recently. I decided this conversation was over. He was talking down to me and accusing me of nonsense. I told him I never lied about this or anything and didn't appreciate his tone. I went around and got in the car and he followed me but kept his distance and said, "I'm not even sure why I wasted my time on you anyway." I was shocked. He was a completely different person. I avoid altercations at all costs, so for someone to speak to me like this was very upsetting. I ended up disclosing the situation to my employers, who got very upset. They did not like how he spoke to me and especially didn't like that this was done around their children. They ended up contacting the school, which I was mortified about. I was terrified to see him again, knowing he'd know I had told. That never happened. He was fired and replaced with a retired cop who was incredibly friendly, and I was grateful. I felt bad. I thought my employers had overreacted, but they were prone to overreactions, and honestly, I was selfishly happy I wouldn't have to see him again. I was worried about how awkward it might be. I let it go, and weeks passed and school drop-offs were uneventful. However, in May of 2018, that changed. I live in an enclosed apartment complex in uptown Dallas. Our apartment neighbors a ton of bars, so we have some issues with break-ins and vandalism. We've always had a police presence, but after an incident where some drunk guy broke into the office through a window, the office manager decided to hire security guards. Guess who ended up doing night shifts? Nick. When I first saw him, I was checking my mail as he passed me in his uniform. I froze and he looked me in the eye and said, "Good evening, ma'am." Good, he must have forgotten me. I was shaking as I went up to the apartment and immediately told my fiancée who I saw. She was aware of the situation with Nick and the old preschool, and being the daughter of a cop, was always more suspicious and suspected the absolute worst out of everyone. She did not want him to find out which apartment was ours, so we started taking the back elevator and parking in a different area. He only patrolled the office area and the perimeter of the building, so we found it easy to avoid him for a week or so. One day, the back elevator was out of order, so I had to take the front elevator from the parking garage up to my apartment on the 4th floor. The elevator stopped in the lobby, and Nick walks on, and I freeze. I guess he could sense I was anxious. He looked at me and said, "Don't worry. I'm not mad you got me fired. Just don't do it again." I didn't even respond. I got off on the 4th floor and said, "Oh God, he knows what floor I live on." I immediately ran inside and told my fiancée, and she said we should contact management. I convinced her this was a bad idea. It could make him angry, and I doubt he'd let it go. He hasn't done anything, but did he follow me here? He knew me. How did he end up here? It seemed like too much of a coincidence. I will say we lived in panic. We kept our door bolted and installed a camera. I'm not sure how many of you are aware of the story of Jennifer Morey. She was a young lawyer living alone in an apartment similar to mine in Houston. She was stalked and attacked by her apartment's security guard. He had access to her apartment. She survived but went through a horrible ordeal, and we were both terrified this could happen to us. Every noise terrified us. We'd get up to make sure the door was bolted several times before we could go to bed. That summer, we were convinced he'd try to do something. Maybe just our overactive, worried minds. We ended up avoiding him for the most part. We saw him occasionally, but he didn't seem interested, and although we were always weary, we figured he got over it and let our guards down. And he never did bother me again. He never said much of anything to me when I did see him. I decided that maybe he was having a really hard time last fall, and he was really a nice guy who maybe didn't have the best social skills. Fall 2018 rolls around, and I'm busy with work, and my fiancé is out of town on business meetings. One weekend, I'm home alone, and it's 3:30 p.m. I'm walking down to the office to get a package. There are about 3 squad cars and police all over the lobby and going up the stairs. I'm wondering what happened, but like I said, we live next to bars, and we've had incidents with drunk idiots, so figure someone had an altercation or something got stolen. I tried to eavesdrop, but don't hear much. I go about my day and then receive an email from my apartment complex saying they have a community-wide meeting scheduled to discuss the incident and go over resident safety concerns. I'm wondering what the hell happened, so of course I go to the meeting, and guess what? A young, single girl living in an apartment by herself showed up mid-afternoon to find Nick inside her apartment. She came in and her drawers were in disarray. He was hiding in her closet and came up with some excuse. The security guards do not have keys to any apartment and aren't supposed to be in the resident halls. Later we found out he had been stalking this girl and stole the keys from maintenance and made copies. This has been going on for at least a month, if not longer. They found several of her belongings in his vehicle, and he was obviously fired and charged. I didn't follow exactly what happened to him, but we assume he did some time. It was absolutely terrifying, and of course our apartment complex got the pantsuit out of them. I was glad his attention shifted, but wondered what could have happened to this girl. But this wasn't the last time I saw or heard of him. A few weeks ago, over a year since I last saw him, I went into this big, fancy mall in my city, and guess who was working security? Nick. My first thought was, you have got to be kidding me. My second thought was, how on earth does this guy keep getting security jobs? Who is dropping the ball here? I saw him and turned around and walked right out the door. Thankfully, I'm moving out of state next month.